Today's daf is daf Nun Zayin, and we're going to start from the top of the Yomid, but first a little bit of background. The Mishnah says that according to Rabbi Akiva, we could derive the conclusion that a Nazir is Magaleach in the case of Revias Dam Min Ames Al Tumas Maga Umasa. And that's based on a Kal V'chomer from Etzem Kisiora, because Etzem Kisiora is not Mitami Bi Oel, and yet the Nazir is Megaleach on Mago Masa. How much more so Revi'as Dam, which is more Chomer, it's Metame Odom Bi Oel, that a Nazir is Megaleach al Mago Masa. And Rabbi Eliezer, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, rejects this, and he says we don't derive a Kal V'chomer from something that's Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. Iboilahu, the Gemara has the following suffix. What's the din that's derived from a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and as a result, according to Rabbi Eliezer, we cannot derive a kal v'chomer from halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Is it the din that a nazir is megaleach on maga etzem kisi ora, and that's derived from halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and therefore, if Rabbi Akiva wants to derive a kal v'chomer from etzem's kisi ora, then he has a problem, because can you derive a kal v'chomer from halacha l'Moshe Sinai?
And that we said no.
Oh, and Rabbi Eliezer says absolutely no. So even though maga b'revi'as dam b'kal v'chomer, according to Rabbi Akiva, but comes along Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and they reject Rabbi Akiva, ain't done in kal v'chomer halacha. Oh, Dilma, there's another possibility. Revi'as dam is the halacha. The fact that the Revi'as dam is mitame bi oel, that means if a person enters into an oel and is Revi'as dam in a mess, then hashoa ima ba'oel, he's shoa in the oel together with Revi'as dam, he contracts tumas oel, that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And then the etzem kisiora, kal v'chomer, and it was Rabbi Akiva who wanted to derive from a kal v'chomer that a nazir is megaleach even on Revi'as dam. And then we imply the principle of Rabbi Eliezer that ain't done in kal v'chomer me'alocha. So again, the two studim of the Gemara's vacillating is that whether or not it's etzem kisi ora, that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and on that basis Rabbi Akiva wanted to construct a kal v'chomer, or is it Revi'as dam that is halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and Rabbi Akiva wanted to construct a kal v'chomer based on the halacha l'Moshe Sinai or Revi'as dam. So again, Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that you could derive conclusions with a kal v'chomer that a nazir is megaleach on maga Revi'as dam, and that kal v'chomer is derived from the din that a nazir is megaleach al maga etzem kisiora. And this kal v'chomer is a result of two dinim. The first din is that nazir is megaleach al maga etzem kisiora, and the second din is that Revi'as dam is metame b'oel, and that makes Revi'as dam more chamura than etzem kisiora, because etzem kisiora is only metame b'maga but not b'oel. When you combine these two dinim, A plus B, A, the fact that a nazir is megaleach on etzem kisiora, and B, the fact that Revi'as dam is more chomer than etzem kisiora, because it's metam v'ol. Therefore, you derive conclusion C that certainly a nazir is megaleach on Revi'as dam. And all this is the kal v'chomer of Rabbi Akiva, that if etzem kisiora, which is kal, vis-a-vis Revi'as dam, which is chamura, and yet the kal, meaning the etzem kisiora, is megaleach, the nazir is megaleach al mago, how much more so Revi'as dam, is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua rejected, because since one of these two dinim is halacha l'Moshe Sinai, you cannot derive a kal v'chomer that's based on a din that is derived and originates from halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The Gemara vacillates which of these two dinim was derived from halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Is it the din that nazir is megaleach on maga etzem kisiora, or is it the din that Revi'as dam is metame b'oel? Toshma, the Gemara is poshet this suffix with a brisa, with regard to the din of Nazir Megaleach al Maga Etzem Kisiora Halacha, that Etzem Kisiora, as far as a Nazir being Megaleach al Maga, is Halacha L'Moshe Sinai. And Rabbi Akiva wanted to derive, based on that Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, a Kavachomer that a Nazir is Megaleach al Maga Revius Dam. The Kalvachom. V'ein Dorin Kavachom Me'aloch. Hadron Alecha Kohen Gadol, and now we start the 8th parak, which is called Shnei Nazirim. The Mishnah says that Shnei Nazirim Sha'amar Lehem Echad, a third party says to two Nazirim, Ra'isi Echad Mikem Shenitma, I know that one of you contracted Tumas Mes. We're going to see later on that this person who's testifying was at a distance. There was some sheretz, there was some tumah that came from a distance. Therefore, from my distance, I couldn't tell which of the two of you became tameh. So therefore, we know that one of these two people have contracted tumas mes, one of these two nazirim, but we don't know which one. And what's going to be the halacha here? Mivim Megalchim. Okay, so basically, just by way of introduction, what the Mishnah is going to establish here is that if each one of these two Nazirim is a Safek Tameh, Safek Tar, then each one of them, in order to be Yotzei Midei Safek, is going to have to bring two sets of Karbanos, a Karban of Nazir Shenitma and a Karban of a Nazir Tar. And we'll see how we work that out between the two of them. And that's what it says, Megalchim. Both of them will do Giluach. And this is going to be a major problem because Giluach, by definition, is a violation of Karcha, when you take off the hair from the sides. And if we don't know whether he's in fact Chayav in Tiglachas, because we're going to ask for a Tiglachas at the end of Tumah and then another Tiglachas at the end of Tara, well, it could be he was Yotze with the first Tiglachas because he was never Tomei to begin with, which means that he's violating the Isur Karcha. Okay, so that's going to be a sugya. However, what we're going to focus on now is karbanos. Mevim karban tumah v'karban tara. They will come to the Beis HaMikdash as shutfim, and they will bring a karban tumah on the side that one of the two is a Nazir Tameh and the other one same. And a karban tara because meaning each one of the two, is going to say, maybe I'm not tameh. So what are these karbanos? In the case of a nazir who is definitely tameh, then after his process of tara is completed, he has to bring a chatas ha'of, he has to bring an olas ha'of, and a kevesh le'osham. A keves liyoshem. So we have here two ophos and one keves. However, karban tara, which a nazir has to bring when he finishes his nazirus of tara, is a keves liola, a kivsa lechatos, and an ayol l'shlom. So basically, there's nothing really in common here. There's no common ground. Now, each one has to make a Tanai, v'omer. Each one says the following, looking at his friend. Imanihu tameh, if I'm the one who contracted the tumah, and your tar, is the karban tumah's mine, shali, and the karban should be brought al shmi, the karban tara hu shalcha, and it'll be brought on your shem. Imanihu tar, if on the other hand I'm the one who's tar and you're the one who's tameh, is karban tahara shali, the karban tumah shalcha. And then what happens? So they've solved the problem of karbanos. Now sofrim, each one of them has to count shloshim yom of nazirus, a new nazirus. Why? Because hayomim rishonim yiplu, on the side that he's tameh, he doesn't have a kiyum of nazirus from the first round because Tumah is Soseres on Nazirus. So he's going to now have to count, because of the Safek Tumah, Shloshim Yom. And now Meviim at the end of the Shloshim Yom, Korban Tara. Once again, they have to bring the Korban Tara b'shutfis, and each one has to make a Tanai. The Omer, one says to the other, Imaniu Tomei, if I was the one who was Tomei, I contracted Tumah, and therefore Korban Atuma Shali, the korban that was taken as a completion of the first Naziris, was mine, the Korban Tara Shalcha, Vizeh. And now we're bringing a Korban Tahara, is Korban Tarasi. It's my Korban, because I was the one who was Tameh. And I'm the one who needs this Korban Tahara. You already brought your Korban Tahara because you were Tar in the first round. But V'im Anihu HaTar, perhaps I'm the one who is Tar. And therefore, the first Korban that was brought at the end of that period of time was my Korban Tara, the Korban Atuma Shalcha. V'zen, now we bring a Korban Tara at the end of this 30-day period, is then Korban Taroscha. This is now going to be your Korban because you brought the original Korban as a Korban of Siyum Nazir Shaltuma. Now you have a Siyum of Naziris of Tara, you need the Korban. So this Tanai is going to solve the problem of a Safek Tameh. So Gemara says, "Katani shnei nazirim sha'amar lahem ra'isi echad michem shenitma v'eni yodeis michem," and therefore we have a Safek Tumah Mai. The Gemara says, "What's going on over here? Why is this a Safek Tumah? Kol Safek Tumah Shus HaYachid." We have a Yalfusa from Sota that just like a woman after Kini and Stira, we assume that she may have become Tameh. And we derive from Sota, because Sota is a case of a Boel and a Neveles that were alone in a closed room. There was no third party there, therefore it becomes a Rishus HaYachid. And we derive from that if a person comes in contact with a sheretz in a Rishus HaYachid, then we're not going to rely on his cheskes tara, but rather we'll be mitameh him misafek. And mas sota bolvin of elis. What's this derivation from sota? That in the case of bol of a sota of bol v'nivelis in stira being there alone in a private place, and we say that she is now b'chezkas tmeya. Is afkol safek tuma, so to any case of safek tuma b'shus hayachid, if there are only two people there, it's a shus hayachid. You go into Ika Beitrei, is then we're going to apply the derivation from sota, and we're going to be metame. Aval hach, but here in our Mishnah, shnei nazirim v'haida koik abem. What about the third party who's testifying that one of the two is tameh? He's also together with them in the same place, hotlos, and therefore you have three people in the same place. Havile safek to b'shus harabim. The presence of three people makes the area into Rishus HaRabim. Has nothing to do with Shabbos, as far as Rishus HaRabim is concerned. But rather in Dinei Safek Tumah, there's a separate halacha that's derived from Sota, that three people together make a Rishus HaRabim, and that would apply even in a private area. And now we have a principle derived from Sota that called Safek Tumah Rishus HaRabim, Sveiko Tar. So why does the Mishnah assume that the two Nazirim in our Mishnah have a din of Safek Tumah? They don't have a din of Safek Tumah. They're both Tahorim. And that we derive from Sota, and here we assume there are three people. Omar Rabba bar Rav Huna, the third party is not there with them, but Be'omer Ra'isi Tumah Shenizko Beinechem. Somehow the Tumah came from afar. I saw the Tumah from a distance, and it landed on one of the two Nazirim. I don't know which one, I couldn't discern that. And therefore, there are only two people, and it's like the Bol and the Veles in the case of Sota, which generates a Safek Tumah, because it's B'shus HaYachid. And in a Safek Tum Rishus HaYachid, the din is Sveiko Tame like Sota. And that's the Mitzius, that's the Ukimta of our mission. So there are only two people, the third party was at a distance. Omer Rav Ashi Dekonami, and Rav Ashi, as we'll soon see, is Medaikus from the Mishnah, because how is it that he doesn't know which of these two Nazirim was Tameh? It must be a case where he was at a distance, and that's why he couldn't discern which one of the two Nazirim became Tameh. Now, in the Parsha of Sota, in Parshas Naso, the Torah says that after Kini and Stira, she will drink from the Mei Morim. And in Masechet Sota, on Daf Chaf Chesam and Beis, the Gemara darshans the pasuk V'hi Nitma'a. And it sounds like the Torah is saying Vadai Nitma'a. So then the question becomes, if Vadai Nitma, why is she drinking for the Mei Morim? But then the pasuk says V'lo Nitma, which sounds like we know that she wasn't Nitma. And if we know that she wasn't Nitma and she didn't have this immorality, then why are we giving her to drink? So the Gemara concludes that her situation is a suffix. We don't know if Nitma or lo Nitma. And therefore, at this point in time, she's Asura Labaila and Laboel until she drinks from the Mei Morim. So the purpose of being mashka, the Mei Morim, is to clarify whether she was nitma or lo nitma, because she's in a state of isur safek. And the Gemara says in many places, in Sota Chav Ches that we mentioned earlier, in Avodah Zarah Lamed Zayin, in Chulin Daf Tes, and other places, that we derive halacha from Sota that safek tum b'rishus hayachid is feiko tameh. And we can only derive the Sfeiko Tameh from Sota in a case of Rishus HaYachid, because Sota is a case of Rishus HaYachid. It's only the bowl and the Nevelis. But in a Rishus HaRab where there are three people or more, then there's no din of Sfeiko Tameh. On the contrary, it would be Sfeiko Tar. And the Gemara Nida on Daf Gimel establishes that before a person became Tameh, he had a Cheskes Tara. And therefore, in a case of Safek, we should not lower his status down to a Tameh, because we should say Uki Gavra Cheskes Tar. However, in the case of Safek Tum B'Shus HaYachid, even though, again, we could have said Uki Gavra Cheskes Tar, we don't do so because we derive from Sota the conclusion that Safek Tum B'Shus HaYachid is Feiko Tameh. Now, there's a Tosfos here, Dibra Maschil Bi Omer, which is a fundamental Tosfos, because he claims that even the din of Rishus HaRabim, Feiko Tar, is derived from Sota. And that doesn't make any sense, because we don't need a Yalfusa from Sota to determine that Safek Tum B'Rishus HaRabim is Feiko Tar. He has a Cheskes Tara. And we'll apply the principle of Uki Gavra Cheskaseh. We only need the Yalfusa from Sota in order to establish the din of Rishus HaYachid, that we don't apply the principle of Uki Gavra Cheskas Tara, and we're Metamei Misafek in Rishus HaYachid. However, there's a Tosfos besides our Tosfos here in Nazir in Masechet Sota, and Tosfos says in Masechet Sota that we need the halacha of Sota derived from Sota, even in the case of Safek Tum B'Rishus HaRabim, and because we didn't have a special halacha derived from Sota that B'Rishus HaRabim is Feiko Tar, we would have extended the din of Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim as well. And once we derive from Sota that in a suffix Sota the Torah says she's Asura because Rishus HaYachid, we would have extended that to Rishus HaRabim as well. Because the Torah in Sota is telling us that in a case of Safek Tuma, we do not apply the principle Uki Gavra Cheskaseh. So let's see if we can summarize. From the perspective of our Tosfos, we don't need a derivation from Sota for the din of Safek Tumah B'Rishus HaRabim, because the entire Yalfusa from Sota is to be Mechadis that Rishus HaYach, we don't apply Chazaka. But in the case of Rishus HaRabim, we don't have that, and therefore we go back to square one. The fallback position is Cheskes Tara. But Tosfos in Masechet Sota has a different approach. And according to Tosfos in Sota, we're going to extend the Chiddush of Rishus HaYach derived from Sota to Rishus HaRabim as well. So we need a limud from Sota to teach me the halacha established as Safek Tum Rishus HaRabim Sveikotar. Now the nafkamina between our Tosfos and Tosfos in Sota is going to be in a case where we cannot equate the Safek Tumah to Sota. And then there's going to be an nafkamina if, let's say, there is no Cheskes Tara. Let me just think about that for a minute. If, let's say, there is no Cheskes Tara. So if you're going with our Tosfos here in Nazir, then in Rishus HaRabim, without a Cheskes Tara, it's going to have to be Tomei. Because the only reason we don't derive any conclusions from Sota to Rishus HaRabim is because in Rishus HaRabim we have a Cheskes Tara. But let's just think, according to Tosfos in Sota, just 1 second. It could be like this. According to Tosfos in Nazir, that Safek Tum Rishus HaRabim we could be mitar because of Uki Gabra B'Cheskaseh, and we don't need the Alfusa from Sota. Then in a situation where there's a Cheskes Tara, we would say Sveikotar in Rishus HaRabim, and we don't even need the derivation from Sota. So the only halacha that we derive from Sota is Safek Tum B'Rishus HaYach. But again, it's possible that Tosfos would say that, let's say, we have a derivation from Sota in a case where there is no, we may need the derivation from Sota in a case where there's no Cheskes Tara, and then we're going to have a din of Safek Tumah B'Rishus HaRabim Sveikotar. So again, according to Tosfos in Nazir, it comes out that you can apply the principle of Safek Tar in Rishus HaRabim even without a Cheskes Tara. On the other hand, according to Tosfos in Sota, on the contrary, we would have said that even in the case of Cheskes Tara, we would still be Mitame in Rishus HaRabim because we derive it from the Yalfus of Sota in Rishus HaYach, and we're going to extend it even to Rishus HaRabim. So now we have to have a halacha that we're not going to apply Safek Tumah Litame in Rishus HaRabim, and that's going to derive from Sota, but it could be that only applies if there's a Cheskes Tara. Let me just double check that. Right. That seems to be correct. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move over to Omid Beis.